Awesome. All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm Paige. I'm an alcoholic. And yeah, where we're picking up is on page 76. And we're diving right into the 8th step, which I was joking before the meeting that this is a step that I have a lot of fun with. I will say I have more fun with as a sponsor than I did as a sponsee. But I will say there's a lot of fun. There's a lot of joy that is to be had in the 8th step. And the irony of it is this is part of the steps that I was so afraid of. So afraid of amends and wanting to sit and avoid the 8th step and sort of almost using the 8th step as a way to beat myself up or shame myself. And that's not what we're doing. And so let's dive into the reading. So we're going to be on page 76, third full paragraph, where it says, now we need more action. Now we need more action? Oh, come on. It's almost like this chapter is into action. I'd say, when do we get a break? But we got a whole quiet hour. We spoke about that 2 weeks ago. So we got a little bit of one there. And it says, without which we find that faith without works is dead. And that idea of faith without works is dead is something that we've been seeing again and again and again throughout this book. It is a theme. The theme of faith without works is dead is this idea that belief in a God, a higher power, God, the creator, the spirit of the universe, the divine, belief in Alcoholics Anonymous, belief in the steps, belief in my sponsor, belief without the tangible actions of all 12 steps, and I will drink again. That's what that saying references. That's what we're talking about there when we say faith without works is dead. And we're on page 76, third full paragraph. We're going to be doing some reading and some chit-chatting and some hanging out, and it'll be great. So it says, let's look at steps 8 and 9. And something that I find really important about that is that it is steps 8 and 9 together. Now, I'm going to be a big hypocrite, and I'm going to do step 8, and then, depending on how I do for time, then do, in theory, step 9 next week, and that's how we'll do it. But how it is set up in this book is that it is 8 and 9 intertwined and 8 and 9 interwoven. And I'll talk about that in a little bit later, but that is what I have found to be most effective, to work 8 and 9 together. And I'll tell you this story because I think it's a funny story, and I look like, a jerk in it. No, I don't look like a jerk, but you get to see like me being a human, deeply flawed person, which, as if you don't see that all the time anyways. But one of my it's unfortunate that I haven't been well and I've been so busy, but one of my favorite things to do is to support people. Like, I love being a cheerleader. And there was a gal, and she was, 76, third paragraph. 76, third paragraph. It should still be the same in the UK. Let me know if that sorts it out. If not, don't worry. If it's wrong, hey, if not, I'll do it. I'm doing all the reading, so you just, it's all good. And then Mary will do the transcription, so you'll get it one way or the other. Awesome. All right, so so one of my favorite things, I love cheerleading people. I love supporting them. And I had, there was a gal, and she was going to be chairing her first ever meeting. So, opening the meeting, assigning the readings, and, getting the flow of the meeting. It was her first time ever doing it. And she's like, Paige, can you come and support me? I'm like, heck yeah, I'm there. So I show up, and this is in Zoom, and I show up, and she's like, oh, we're on step 8. Can you read a little something on step 8? And I read this paragraph that we're reading and the next paragraph. And I read that because I'm a big book gal. I love the big book. The 12 and 12 didn't even come to mind. I'm read out of the big book. And then there was a gentleman And it was kind of, it's not anyone's meeting, but when it's like, that's kind of his meeting, like that sort of vibe. And he showed up and he was like, you know what? There is F all about step 8 in the big book. Step 8's in 12 and 12. And he, did all that and the swearing and the posturing. And being the spiritual giant that I am, I got super resentful. I'm like, that. Now, I will tell you the honest order of how I did these things. It was the last thing I was doing in the evening. So what I did was when I did my evening review, I did take it through the columns and I saw in my resentments that, your girl, she can have this need to be right and seen as right. And I got my value and worth attached to, how other people see me and all that sort of stuff. So I saw that. And then after I did that, I was like, wait a minute. And I had a look at the book. And I had a look at the book in a bit of a different way. Because I wanted to see, is there more about step 8 than what I had realized? And my experience is yes. It really is steps 8 and 9 working together. And there's a lot of times we'll talk about this more in step 9, but we'll be given different examples of amends that we need to make. And we will also be given directions on how to build willingness to make those amends. So it is 8 and 9 together. And so the spiritual giant that I am is like, well, I was right. I didn't go back and say that. I just being a little jerk today. All right. So it goes on to say, let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. Wait a minute, I already have the list. Where did this come from? It says, we made it when we took inventory. So who goes on our 8-step list? Now, it's by and large going to come from our 4th step. And there are going to be exceptions to that. You might have somebody or an institution or something like that where we have caused harm. But what we didn't do was we didn't have a resentment or we didn't have any, fear or any romantic sexual harms in relation to it. And so, not just so I'm making it up, but I feel like going on a little bounce. So if y'all want to bounce with me, all my bouncing is consensual. You can bounce if you want. So let's bounce all the way over to 67. Oh man, 76, 67. This is not good for somebody like me today where the migraine's hitting and it's like, oh, I'm mixing up my numbers. But we're going to go to page 67. And where we're going is, it's going to be the it's the second full paragraph. It's referring to our list again, that paragraph, about halfway down. And this is in response to the 4th column of resentments. It says, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely looked for our own mistakes. And I have to fight my urge to go into detail about this. And I'm like, fight it, get to the point, page. And it says, where had we been? Selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened. Not had we been, but where had we been? Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. And I always joke, it's okay if you need to use a pink pen or a blue pen. Yellow might be a little tough because it'll be hard to read later on. But, pencil, it's not the best because it can get smudged. But, you can stay sober using a pencil, I promise. But I am a black pen sort of gal, so that's just how I am. It says we admitted our wrongs honestly and we're willing to set these matters straight. So what happens is with many of our resentments, we go through this process and we come out the other side and it's like, oh man, I owe them an amends. In fact, a direct amends. And I'm willing. And to be fair, I'm willing, I always talk about willingness, and we're going to talk about it more. Willingness does not need to look like, oh boy, I just can't wait. I would love to. oh, that sounds a delightful activity, amends. No, it could look like I really need to vomit, but I can see the truth about the situation. Where's the spiritual Pepto-Bismol? That is what willingness looks like. So a lot of our the people on our 8-step list are going to come from our resentments. Now, let's pop over. Let's go have a look at page 69, very bottom paragraph. And again, we're talking about where do these these people, these institutions that we owe an amends to, where does this come from? So 69 bottom paragraph, and it is in reference to our sex inventory. And it says, whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. We must. Now, this is what I'm pointing out, and it's rude because it says must. Ugh, it's a little musty. Somebody open a window. We must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, providing that we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. So much of our 8-step list is going to come from our resentments. Probably not too many from fears, just even from my experience, but also I want to look at who I harmed from my sex harms, my relationship harms. Now, going back to page 76, there will be, and it is okay if there is, people or institutions with whom we harmed and whom we owe an amends that maybe we didn't, that we didn't have on any of our inventories. And it's like, what do I do? Just add them to the list. Just add them to the list. That's it. I know that you guys would never overcomplicate, but somebody like me, that's something I did a time or two. What do I do? Listen, I am making mountains out of molehills. My whole life is the Rocky Mountain of molehills. That's Swiss Alps of overthinking. That's how I'm living. And so when we talk about this, let's look at 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. We subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. When did we do that? That drastic self-appraisal came through the 4-step inventory, and we continued that in the 5th step. And if after 4 and 5 we were like, that was pretty drastic. That's how I know. That's another one of those lines. That's how I know I have been fearless and thorough. That's how I know I've given it my best. And so what I want to offer is a helpful way of formatting our 8-step list. So the first thing that when I work with sponsees, what I've done in the past, the first thing that I do is I just get the list. I'll go back through that 4-step, and you can write it, like on an envelope, on a scrap piece of paper. You don't have to do it too fancy at this point. But I want to get those names, write down who comes to heart. Now, I point this out, who comes to heart, is because if you're here today and you're like, do I really owe an amends? I will give you a unfortunate, surefire way to figure out whether you or not you owe an amends. And it is whether you think about that person or that situation and your tummy goes, what? That is how we know that there's an amends. I wish the 8-step wasn't so rooted in gastrointestinal issues, but here we are. So that's how I know, because I can feel it in my heart. I can feel it, that there's just something to clean up, something to clear up, so I can add it to that list. So that's what I want to do. I want, first and foremost, just want to make a list from my 4-step, from anything that's missing, stream of consciousness, list. And then I'll show you, I'll do the screen share and show you. This is a way of formatting that you might find helpful. Is it literally in the book? No. So if you don't find it helpful, don't use it. Don't use it. I'm gonna give you some other stuff that's definitely not in the book, but I think is fun. Wait till we talk about a men's roulette. It's a hoot. Well, at least I have fun with it. So this is just a really helpful way of formatting a piece of paper for your 8-step list. And what we do, or what we can do, is to put them into columns of willingness. So the columns we have is the right now, I'd be willing to make amends to them right now if they, right around the corner. I just saw them. I'd do it. I'm willing. Doesn't matter if they live across the world. Doesn't matter if they've passed on. Doesn't matter if I owe the money and I can't afford it. All I am gauging is my level of willingness. And so if I've got ones that I'd be willing to make right now, I put them in my right now column. Another column that we have is the later column, and some people sort of merge the later and maybe. I don't. Again, this is vibes. We're 8-stepping with the vibes, but you can have the later column, which is I'd be willing to make amends to them, but I'd like to get a few under my belt, or not right away. And then the maybe. I don't know if I should or shouldn't, or I'm not sure. And then we have the never, which is also known as the F no, over my dead body, absolutely not, I'm not doing it column. And so I populate that list. Also, what can be a helpful thing to do? I mentioned, what do we do if we owe money? And if I can give a ballpark amount of how much money that I owe, that can be just a helpful way so that I don't have this like mythical number in my head growing and growing and growing and growing. I have it on paper. I can see it, and we can help then move with it, and we can make it a lot more manageable. So and just name, just putting it wherever it feels. And it really is based on vibes, based on how I'm feeling, how willing I am, And so and I'm going to go into a bit more detail as we continue reading, but what we're going to see is that this can help us build that willingness so those nevers can get done and those maybes can get cleaned up. So going back to where we're at on page 76. So it says, now we go out to our fellows to repair the damage done in the past. And I point this out. I go out. I've got to find them. I've got to reach out. And I will let you know God will absolutely bring them in your path. But I don't just sit and wait for it, like, all right, I know nobody would ever owe any sort of financial amends to the IRS or the Canadian Revenue Agency. But here's my experience. If I hang out in the basement and I'm like, all right, IRS, if it's your will, and to be fair, they will get a hold of you if you owe them an amends. But I'm just throwing that out. Like, I've got to seek. That is the responsibility that I have to find them, to reach out. And I want to point out when it says, and repair the damage done in the past. What is an amend? Well, in my 1930s dictionary, an amend is to free from fault, to improve, or to correct. Ultimately, an amend is that to repair, to restore, to make right. And that's what we're doing. This is going to be far more than an apology. Now it says, now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris. So the harms, how we did that spiritual house cleaning and we cleaned out the debris that was inside of me. I'm going to clean out the debris, the harms that I've caused out in the world. And it says, we attempt to sweep away the debris which is accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. Not just on our effort or not just making amends for things that we did when we were drinking or because we were alcoholic. We're making amends for all the harms that we've caused. And we spoke a lot about what happens when we live on self-will and try to run the show. We saw that at the bottom of page 60, all of 61, and as well as included on 62. What it is like when I am trying to run the show, play God in my life and the life of others, I harm them. And if we've been around a while, we've definitely had to make amends for things done in sobriety. And that's real. You can't even be like, I was a different person then. No, it was Tuesday. It was last Tuesday. I was not a different person, I was the same jerk, and I can't even hide behind I'm spiritual, So it goes on to say, if we haven't the will to do this. And this is one of those places that I love. You see, the book again and again and again and again and again and again meets me where I'm at. At no point is the book expecting that an alcoholic is going to be like, I am super willing. Amends, that sounds great. I would rather do that than anything else. A vacation? No, thank you. Amends. Birthday cake? Gross. Amends. A walk on the beach? Sand? Gross. Amends. No, that's not how we're showing up to this process. We're afraid. It's funny, I do 2 studies on Wednesdays, and at the earlier study, I was talking about step 5. And I was talking about what are the 2 steps that this is broad strokes. If it doesn't apply to you, I'm not talking about you then. But I will say most alcoholics are afraid of step 5 and step 9. And so why would I have all this fear on 8? Because I'm afraid of 9. Why would some of us, not you guys would never sit on a 4-step. Why might some of us sit on 4? Because I'm afraid of 5. It's that fear. And what is that fear? It's that fear of rejection. I'm going to come to you humbly and admit my wrongs and try to make that right. And there's a humility and a vulnerability. And if you say, go F yourself, I'm going to feel that rejection. And what are our 2 greatest fears in resentments? Our top 3 resentments are always like mom, dad, the ex, and our greatest fears are rejection and abandonment. And again, I'm speaking in broad strokes after doing this a whole lot and seeing, what always seems to come first. So if I am not willing, the book is not saying you're bad, feel bad, think bad, like shame, shame, shame. No, the book is like, if we haven't the will to do it, okay, of course not. Of course we wouldn't have the will to do it. We're afraid. Maybe we're still a little resentful. Maybe we're still a little like, but they hurt me first, all of that. But if we haven't the will to do this, it says we ask until it comes. We ask until it comes. And that is the first direction that we are given to build willingness. The 8th step, and I probably should have kicked off this thing by explaining, hey, what's the 8th step? Is we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. And so it's about a list and it's about willingness. And here's the thing. If I do not have willingness, I can pray for willingness. If you guys remember 2 weeks ago, we were speaking about the 6th step, and this is the exact same prayer. We can ask for willingness. God, help me to be willing to make the amends that I don't want to make. God, help me to be fearless and thorough. Help me to take this course of action. And I talk about this a lot, so I apologize if you're sick of hearing it, because my brain works this way. But whenever I'm afraid to take any spiritual action in Alcoholics Anonymous, what I have found so incredibly helpful is to remember I don't have to do it. I just have to get me out of the way, and God will do it through me. And that's a really felt sense thing where it's like I just need to take that leap of faith. So the first direction, if I am struggling with with the fear, the uncertainty, or I'm not sure how to do it, how to make the amends, or unwillingness to make the amends, is to pray for the willingness. So I can pray for the willingness. Now, I'm going to go back to the list and point out why this is a helpful, or why this can be a helpful list. So the first way in which this can be a helpful to put it in this sort of order is it allows me to attack these different amends in different ways. What I mean by that is if I have people in my right now list, guess what I can do? Make amends to them. Right now. I can just do it. I can just go and make those amends. And spoilers, guess what happens? They go well. Guess what? In 9 out of 10 cases, the unexpected happens. You know what's unexpected? They go well. I'm going to make amends to like mom, and she's going to call the SWAT team or something. That's what I think is going to happen, And it's like, but I make these amends and it starts to go better. And it starts to go well, and that builds momentum, and that builds my willingness. And so what am I doing with my laters and my maybes? Well, maybe what I'm starting to do is I'm starting to write out those amends and what they look like. And that helps to build the willingness. And we're going to do that with our nevers as well. But I can specifically and strategically pray for the willingness to do some of those nevers. Pray for the willingness to do some of those maybes. I can also, seeing that I've got some nevers and maybe I've got a tremendous amount of fear, I can be focused and I can write fear inventory on those nevers. And I can build that momentum. You see, willingness. I think we, as human beings, expect willingness to be an indefinite state or a binary, which is to say it's on or it's off. I'm willing or I'm not. And I will say that willingness, if not fed, if not fueled, if not cultivated, is a finite resource. Willingness, it'll run out. But what fuels willingness? Consistency. Consistency is the key. Consistency will allow me to be willing and allow that willingness to grow. So if I am praying for my nevers, that will build momentum. If I'm working on my right nows, that will build momentum. And that's how we build willingness. And so I'll share one of my, so that's one way. That is a reasonable, conventional. Many people have done it this way. Some people do it a little different, where they write their amends out on like cue cards and then put them into piles of right now, maybe, never, and work it that way. And that's totally cool. But so that's a very conventional way of doing it. Start with the right nows, and that moves with the laters, and eventually those nevers will slide over, and we've written them out and we've prayed, and it builds that momentum. But also, that's how most people approach their amends. But if you want to get over the fear of amends, if you want to build that willingness, you know what you can do? You can start with that never. You can start there. And I have had, and I've not done that, but I have had a couple sponsees that have done that, where they have started with who is on their never list. And so, and because if that is the biggest thing that we are afraid of, I can just rip the Band-Aid off. I don't have to wade into the cold swimming pool. I can cannonball right in. And what we're going to learn is a lot about my sponsorship style. What I do is with sponsees and grand sponsees, and if anyone here who has not done their amends or is afraid of their nevers, if you dive in with your nevers, here's what I'll do. I will buy you a patch that says amends badass. And that is something I have done. I've like 4 or 5 of them at least. It's like black and pink, and it's like amends badass, because that is pretty badass. But then it again builds momentum, and that's what we're trying to do. We are trying to build momentum with these amends. And another thing that I do when I'm working with my sponsees, now, if you have not made amends yet, I am going to sound like I have lost my ever-loving mind. Actually, to be fair, it's me. You've already thought that. Totally fair enough, She's out of her mind. Yes, and. But when I'm sitting with sponsees, and we're at their 8-step list, and I help them write out the amends. That's another way to build willingness. But what I recommend sending the approach message to 5 or 10 people on their list right now. Let's reach out to 5 of them. Let's reach out to 10 of them. I know some of you are like, oh, where's the spiritual Pepto? That sounds awful. I want to vomit. Absolutely. And here's what I know. As somebody who's made amends, and as somebody who has walked, and I really mean, and I don't walk, but I walk with spiritually, who's walked with so many people through this process. We live in an age of ghosting and avoiding, and what we're afraid is I'm going to send 10 messages and 10 people are going to get back to me right away. I promise you that's not going to happen. I promise you that's not going to happen. It's never happened. You'll have 2 or 3 get back to you, right away, and you book them in, and we make those amends. And I'm bouncing around a little, but when it talks about, on page 77, it talks about on paragraph 1 to second paragraph near the bottom of the page, where it says, nevertheless, with a person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. And that is another way to build willingness. I'll talk about some more fun ones and some softer ways. But we can pray for willingness. We can move with the willingness. So start with our right nows and build that willingness. We can rip off the Band-Aid and dive into our nevers, and that helps build willingness. But one of the most powerful ways to build willingness is just to put the bit in our teeth and go to it. Put the bit in our teeth, bite down, grin and bear it. All right. Hey, I'm reaching out because I owe you an amends. Hey, I'm reaching out to you today because I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and part of the process of staying well requires that I look upon my life. And in that reflection, I saw that you were one of the people that I had hurt. And I would like to, if you would open, to set aside some time where I could perhaps try to make it right. That's more like how we would send the message than, yo, amends, what up? But to each their own. And so we send out those approaches, and there is this moment of we send out the approaches and there's that, but then that anxiety dissipates, and we've done it, and we've taken that step. And I can tell you, as somebody who has worked with a lot of people through amends, one of the big dangers about complacency, and it's really just, God bless, it's just fear. It's just that human fear. And that fear builds momentum. Momentum is going to be happening in this process regardless. I'm either going to be building momentum in making amends, or I'm going to be building momentum with fear and avoidance and complacency. And so it's like rip off the Band-Aid, dive in. And so, one of the main dangers is we make some amends and we feel, usually, I'm not speaking about anyone here, nobody here would ever do this. We make a couple amends, usually some of the gimmies, some of the family, they're just happy we're sober and, they love us and we'll make a casserole and all that. and then it's like, whew, that was great. And I get stuck and I get stalled out. And I start avoiding. And the more I avoid, the easier it is to avoid and the harder it is to take action. And it's one of those dangerous places. So when I work with people, we're sending out 5 to 10. Pick 10, let's go. It does not take long to get well. It does not take long to get through these amends and to do the best we can. And so those are a couple ways to build willingness. Now, at the paragraph that I was supposed to be on, where it says, if we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. Again, one way to build willingness. It says, remember, it was agreed at the beginning that we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. Hey, wait a minute. When did I agree that I was going to go to any lengths? Third step. Hey guys, it's third step. And what's interesting is that point is reiterated twice in this part of the book. Because why? We're afraid. We agreed at the beginning we were going to give this our best go. So if I am afraid, it's a callback. Hey, I made that third step decision. I got to follow through. And now what I'll share with you are some unconventional ways to build willingness in amends. And again, it is sort of illuminates my sponsorship style, which is chaos and bribery, which is, not always the most spiritual, but chaos and bribes. Woo! So one of the things that I have done, now I want to be clear, I don't just throw all of these things at everyone. I use discernment, I get consent, but one of the things, and so if somebody has a gambling problem, we're not playing amends roulette, but one of the things that I like to do, and my sponsees will tolerate is a little game called men's roulette. And what I'll do is I'll sit on a call with them, and I'll grab my tablet, and I'll get a virtual roulette wheel with all of their 8-step list on, and I'm like, all right, let's spin the wheel. And again, with their consent. I'm not just deciding that that's how we're approaching this. I use discernment. But I'll tell you a powerful experience I had with this sponsee. We were doing this, and she was just kind of feeling the resistance, and I suggested a men's roulette because I think it's funny. And she's like, all right. And so we put it on the wheel, we start spinning, and she's like, oh man, I hope it doesn't land on this one person. And I was like, oh, why? And we start talking about it, and it's her never. And as we're talking and as we're moving through, and what happens is she's like, you know what? Let's do it. And she ripped off the Band-Aid, and she reached out for the amends. Now, what's powerful about this is this was a person in her life. The thought of this person had so much power over her, even nightmares. And the thing that she did, it was it felt like it was the worst thing anyone could do, or in that situation. It wasn't the worst thing anyone ever did or anything like that, but it just felt so real and so heavy. And when she got to make the amends, what happened was, I did this thing. Oh, I don't even care about that. Do you know what I mean? And the freedom that came as the result. And so I do think there's fun in playing a men's roulette. It's silly, it's whimsical, and it's gamifying it. Now, speaking of gamifying the 8th step, one of the things that I've also done is I have created what I call amenders. If you are familiar, Dr. Bob, he was met with Bill Wilson, met him, carried the message, and Dr. Bob said, you know what, I'm willing to do all of this. You're the first guy that spoke my language from lived experience. I'm going to any lengths. I'll do anything, not amends, but anything else. And what happened was he relapsed. And when he came back from his relapse, he went out after performing surgery. He was a doctor. Sorry, if you didn't know that was a bit of a curveball thing. As a doctor, he went out and he made all those amends he was afraid to make. And so I would joke, and I made little sticker designs that are like, he went on a bender and followed it up with an amender. And so what I like to is call them amenders. And I treat it like it's a UFC fight. And I will make fight posters, and the different people, sponsees and friends and stuff, they'll have different fight names, different amender names. And it's a race, and it's a race to things like 5 amends or 10 amends. And I do give prizes, so bribery, which is, again, maybe not the most spiritual way, but listen, we can't argue with it's effective. Bribes, it works. And so we do a whole thing. And then for a while there, we started having teams. We even had Team Canada versus Team USA for a while. We had to get some more people on Team USA. It wasn't going well. But we had Team Canada versus Team USA, and we turn it into a game. Because a lot of times when we come to the 8th step, it's like, oh, you got to watch your motives. And to be fair, there is an element of we want to make sure we're not hurting people. But I think we overanalyze our motives as a reason to avoid taking action. My experience is when I have made the amends, that spiritual process has corrected any improper motives that I have had. That's how I begin to get free. And so if my motive in making amends is in part so that the other amend team doesn't win, and I get a little amend prize, then absolutely, we're just trying to build willingness. And so we have fun with that, and we have names and championships and all of that. So let me know if you're feeling, and that works very well with sponsees that are competitive. And then I've had it work very well with ones, oh, I am not competitive, and then you throw them in the amender and they're like, I can't let them win, off I go. And what happens is we take the action and we get the results, and that's always the order. If I take the action, I get the results. Even if it's a little bit of a game, even if it's fun and silly, to start, if I take the actions, I will get the results. And so it goes on to say, page 76, probably there are still some misgivings. Probably we're feeling afraid and unsure about making amends. As we look over the list of business acquaintances and friends we have hurt, we may feel diffident, which is to say unsure, not feeling great about going to them on a spiritual basis. Let us be reassured. To some people, we need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on our first approach. We might prejudice them. And so what it's saying is like, hey, that first approach, we don't have to emphasize, hey, I'm sober and I'm spiritual and I'm doing so well. We can just say, hey, I've caused you harm and I would like to make it right. Now that first approach is the approach message. And it goes on to say, at the moment, we are trying to put our lives in order, but this is not an end in itself. Our real purpose, and this is important, our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. So we're making amends, yes, because I don't want to drink again. Yes, because at the very beginning I said I would. Yes, we're going through that process. But why are we making amends? We are making amends to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. And that is what I agreed to in the third step. Again, it is a callback to that. And there are times when I work with sponsees and they say, you know what, I'm willing. Paige, I'm willing to make amends because I know it's not about me. And then I have sponsees that are saying, all right, I'm willing to make amends because I know it's about me and it's not about them. And I want you to know that either time I don't correct them and I shut up and I don't take them to this part of the book because they're willing. I'm not doing anything to, yep, I don't care why you do it. Go do it, right? Because that's what we're trying to do. We are trying to build that momentum. And so, I spoke about we take the bit in our teeth and we go to it. So one of the most powerful ways I can build momentum is just by doing it. And the phrase "take the bit in our teeth," it comes from horses. So horses, when you ride a horse, they have what's on their head is a bridle, and what goes in their mouth that connects to the reins is what's known as a bit. And so when it says we take our bit in our teeth, I first described it as all right, grin and bear it. I'm going to send that amends approach message and see about doing that amends to that person I don't really like. Put it in my grit and bear it. But when we look at horses and riding a horse, to have a bit in our teeth is to be led and to be guided. And that's another way to look at this, that I am being led, that I am being guided by God, higher power, the creator, the spirit of the universe, the divine, that I am being led by God. Now, what I'm going to do is I am going to pop us over to page 79. And it's going to be the first full paragraph on page 79. And the reason I'm talking about this, we'll talk in greater detail about more specific types of amends next week as we focus more specifically on the 9th step. But what I want to point out is that there are so many prayers in this part of the book. The first prayer that we saw is, praying for the willingness. And it's okay to pray for the willingness to be willing, or to pray for the willingness to be willing to be willing. I don't know how far you can take that back, but I'm sure it's fine. You know what I mean? Just pray. Just pray that I be moved and I be changed. And we can pray these 9th step prayers. We can pray these 8th step prayers. I don't care what we call them, but I wanted to point out some of these prayers. And on page 79, it says, although these reparations take innumerable forms, and it's talking about there's many different ways to make amends very specifically for criminal behavior. there are some general principles which we find guiding. Reminding ourselves that we have decided to go to any lengths to find a spiritual experience. Oh man, there's that third step kicking me in the butt again. Darn it. Just gonna throw that in my face. And to be fair, I do point that out. When we're at step 3 and I ask, are you willing to go to any lengths? And they say yes. And I'm like, we will be referring back to this moment, because that's how we do. But it says, so that call back to the third step. And so much of this program is a call back to the third step, because the third step is a decision that I'm willing to throw myself into this work, into this way of life, to have this experience. It goes on to say we ask. And any time in this book it says we ask, that is a prayer. So we ask that we be given strength and direction to do the right thing, no matter what the personal consequences may be. We may lose our position or reputation or face jail, but we are willing. We have to be. We must not shrink at anything. So I'll tell you, I use that prayer on a daily basis because I'm fun, because I'm just a fun person, just doing 8th and 9th step prayers all the time. But how I like to move with that prayer and how I like to pray that prayer is, God, I ask that I be given strength and direction to do the right thing, no matter what the personal consequences may be. Help me to be willing to not shrink at anything. And that's a beautiful prayer that I can move with, especially with some of those nevers. Oh, some of those nevers that are feeling a little sticky and a little persnickety. And I'm like, oh, so I can move with those. And then, so the 8th step is all about willingness, that I be willing to go to the most extreme edge to make these amends. That will then be sort of tempered by, okay, we do need to approach this practically, and we'll talk about that more next week. But the 8th step is about building and growing and cultivating that willingness, which again, for me, is that momentum. So let's flip the page and go to the very top of page 80. And at the very top of page 80, what we're given is some step 8 directions. I like to say pre-amends directions. So it says, before taking drastic action, which might implicate other people, we secure their consent. So this is in regards very specifically to amends where somebody else caused harm. And I'll tell a story about that. You know what? I'll tell the story right now. This was a sponsee I worked with many, many years ago. She's since passed on. She passed this Christmas season, and she was living in a sober living house, and it was a bunch of them that were friends, and so the sober living house, they would get donations from the food bank. And what would happen was, her and a friend of hers, they would get the donations and they would see the cheese and they would steal the cheese and then they would hide the cheese and they'd be like, weird, we didn't get any cheese, like that. That's what they did. And they were all still friends and all still like close. And when I was working with her and we first approached her amends, I'm like, this is the one we're starting with, because, hey, spoilers, she's not going to lose friends over the cheese. I knew that. I knew all the people involved. I knew it was going to be fine. Yeah, absolutely. And it was just one of those beautiful examples where she could go and make the amends and practice not throwing her cheese cohort, her cheese, not acquaintance, but her cheese accomplice under the bus, and just take full cheese responsibility. And guess what? It went well. So, I think about that. But it's also important to understand that when I'm reaching out for amends, I'm also securing the consent of the people that I'm reaching out to. So whenever, and we'll talk again in detail next week, but whenever I make an amends, what I do is I start with an approach message. And the approach message explains what I'm doing. And actually, here, I'll screen share so you guys can see visually, for the those that are more visual learners, what specifically we're talking about. And hold on, I'll do that. So we start with the approach, which is, why am I here? Like, what am I doing? Booking a time. So it's a reaching out where I explain, hey, and I'll make it so you guys can see, yeah, that'll maybe work, I don't know. But the approach. So I'm reaching out to you because, sometimes it's helpful to mention, hey, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, or to mention I'm in recovery. And part of this process asks that I reflect upon my life. And in so doing, I saw that I caused you harm. I'd like the opportunity to make an amends or try to make things right if I could. And so what I want to do is I want to find a time that is going to work best for them. I want to be considerate of them and their time, especially if part of the harm was me not being respectful of their time. Just, I'm throwing that out there. That is so important. So I want to reach out. And what I learned, being sober sort of through COVID, when I was working with a sponsor, there was a sponsor I had that was very, very big on eyeball to eyeball, face to face, and that's the only way. But as I was working with people sort of through COVID and through that period of time, I realized that not everybody had the same comfort level meeting in person. And what I learned from that lived experience was I can ask and do what would be best for the other person. Hey, I'd love to, sit down in person with you to make an amends, but if there's something that you would prefer, like over the phone or video call, or if you're not comfortable hearing from me in that way and would prefer a text or an email, so I get their consent. And I find that is helpful. And honestly, that counteracts a lot of the fear that we have around amends. So we secure their consent. And then it says, if we have obtained permission, so we've got permission from from our fellow cheese thieves, or from the person who's going to receive the amends. And then it says, have consulted with others. Consulting with others is taking it to our sponsor. That's probably one of the best people to take it to. But if in a pinch, another recovered member, because I am big on when I get that little tummy trouble, that little twist, I call them the twisties and the resisties. That's how I know I owe an amends. I get the twisties and the resisties. I know that I've got to work within that window of willingness. I know I got to make that amends, reach out for at least that approach quickly. Otherwise, I'm going to be talking myself out of it. So especially if we're just starting with amends, let's reach out to our sponsor. And what I do with my sponsees is I sit with them and we write out this second part together, which is what I did, being specific and focusing on my defects of character. So we write out together what the amends is. This is the way I harmed you, and it was selfish, it was inconsiderate, it was dishonest. And I really, really focus on that, and we get that written out. And so they have it on to be honest, I typically help by voice to text, and then they can write it out. But so that they have it. They don't have to use it as a perfect script. But it's just so they have something. Because guess what? When we're going into amends, maybe not you guys, you big, brave drunks, but somebody like me, I get nervous. You know what I mean? And I forget my words and I forget things. And so having it on paper can be so helpful. And again, I'll talk about this next week. But if I'm afraid that they're going to think it's insincere, I can always let them know, hey, I just want you to know I wrote this amends down and I'm going to be reading off it. But it's not because it doesn't come from my heart. It is because this amends is important to me and I want to make sure I don't leave anything off. And we'll talk about this more next week, but where does this come from? Well, if I have been thorough in my inventory, I can get a lot of the amends from my fourth column, not all of it. Not all the fourth column will go into my amends, but if I have been thorough right here in the fourth column, that will give me a lot of stuff that I can work with and that I can move with for the amends. So we're getting close on time. Who would have thought? So let's go to page 82, and we're going to go to the first full paragraph, and it's about halfway down. And it's in regards to how do we handle infidelity in a relationship, and how do we handle making amends for infidelity. And this is the direction. When it talks about it, maybe both decide that the way of good sense and loving kindness is to let bygones be bygones. But here is a very helpful, important prayer. Each might pray about it, having the other one's happiness uppermost in mind. So praying, what God show me. I'm Canadian, I'm going to throw in a please. God, please show me what would be best for the other person. Not me, not what I want, not easiest for Paige, but what would be best for the other person. Last prayer. We're going to go right across the page on page 83. It's that first paragraph and just the bottom of that paragraph. It goes on to say, so we clean house with the family, asking. Again, anytime in this book it says ask or to ask or we ask, guess what that is? A prayer. Asking each morning in meditation. That implies I have a morning meditation practice. They're not even saying do a morning meditation practice. It's like it's such a foregone conclusion you'd be doing it. We're saying, hey, when you do it, do this as well. Asking each morning in meditation that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. And for me, that ties so beautifully in with that St. Francis prayer, that way. And again, how I approach 8 and 9, where it's like I'm at this precipice, and let's be real, I'm scared. I'm scared of rejection. I'm scared of consequences. I'm scared. And all I need to do is get me out of the way and let this power flow through me. And so I'll leave it there. That's going to be it for step 8, but we're going to go deeper and talk about step 9 next week. Over to you, Vivian.